Shadow people and iron, two seemingly unrelated things that actually have a lot more in common than you think. All right, so I've been doing research. I study a lot, so I read a lot of random stuff and I research a lot of stuff. Like I'm into the health field, I'm into the paranormal, I'm into physics and science and all kinds of things. When I do my research, I kind of match information together from all the sources that I've ever read to try to piece together a whole picture of what things really are. A lot of people assume that shadow people are spirits or demons or ghosts, but they're not. They're actually flesh and blood. And this is a hard thing to prove. This is a tale of a man who became a shadow person and returned to the flesh. Check it out. I had to change the names of the characters in the story because, number one, they don't matter. These people aren't famous. And they're very hard to pronounce, so I decided to just change them to Western names. This is not the full story. I rewrote it and I started off kind of in the story a little bit because it was too long. And before this, it's like a long story about this guy. His wife had some issue with him and wanted to get rid of him. So there's a supernatural creature called a kukushka. And it's an otter man, like an otter man in southern Alaska. It's a tribe down south. And she tied a piece of sinew from a land otter through his ear piercing on his ear to lure the otter man to him because the sinew had the spiritual energy of the otter people on it. And apparently if you use their stuff, they get attracted to you and will take you. And she wanted to get rid of him, so that's what she did. And with that, here's the story. William went out fishing as usual the next day, and the morning calm water was helping him make great time when he approached the point. The water became incredibly rough. He was a professional boatman, and he would usually have directed his canoe ahead with little effort, but he felt himself losing control of the boat, and at the same time the canoe turned over. Unknown to William, the land otter people who lived under the point had actually been watching him as he became disoriented under the influence of their spiritual power, and now rushed out in their canoe to appear to save him. One of them, in the guise of his father's servant, stretched out a hand to him, but William understood much better than to accept such help. He clung to his capsized hull and eradicated the kukushka's offer for several days. It was just when he recognized that he was lost at sea and had no chance of getting back to his family and his friends that he agreed to join them. So he let the kukushka rescue him. When in their canoe, he started to become unconscious because he all of a sudden discovered himself in their den under the point. So when he was in their canoe, he started to become unconscious. He got disoriented because all of a sudden he discovered he was in their den at the point. At first, he thought he was home because everything looked quite like his own home in town. And things were being done in much the same way as they do in his village. The food was the only thing suspicious. What appeared to be a good meal was just heads and bones of fish, and quickly William's mouth was all cut up and injured from attempting to eat them. So the meal looked appealing, and he tried to eat it, but it just cut his mouth up because it was actually just bones and fish heads. When William did not return by the evening, his family members became concerned. He was an experienced boater, and the weather had actually been fairly calm. What could have delayed his return? They waited 2 more days and then went to the spot where he normally fished. Initially, they found nothing, but later on in the day, they spotted his capsized canoe in the water. How could this have occurred to William? A man asked. I have actually seen him manage a canoe in powerful storms. He could not have swum to shore from here, another man mentioned. He should have drowned. Or the kukushkas have actually saved him, stated another. Kukushkas? William is too strong-willed to be won over by the kukushkas, the first guy retorted. They went back to the village with their unfortunate news. Search parties searched for William for many days, but When they found absolutely nothing, the family offered a potluck for him. Considering that he was a nephew of a very rich man, instead of putting the food into the fire, as was customarily performed for people who died, they put it in the water for him. They wanted to send him food, because if he consumed the land otter's food, he would never be able to return home again. Throughout the potluck, William's uncle Bob, who was also the shaman of the village, asked the spirits to protect his nephew and to assist the searchers to find him. Then the rescuers set out once again. William was missing for 2 long years. During this time, his buddies, led by his uncle Bob, continued to hunt for him, sustaining long fasts to keep in touch with their spiritual powers. However, when Bob's spirit failed to find him, the family gave up looking. "He's lost in the woods or drowned," they said. No one dared mention what they actually feared, that the land otter people have actually abducted him. Bob's spirit continued to inform him that William was alive, but the shaman, convinced by his loved one's doubts, no longer thought he was alive, despite what the spirits told him. "Why does my spirit state that William lives when he cannot be found?" the shaman asked. "My spirit has lost his power to aid me?" And the shaman fell into despair. Although William dealt with the land otter people for all these 2 years, they were not able to gain control over his mind or to turn him against his family. Every day he thought about his relatives and longed to be back in his home in the village. It was a memory of home and the household that kept his resolve alive and kept him from becoming one of the land otter people. One afternoon, when all the land otter people headed out to hunt for sea lions, the old woman who always stayed in the corner reached out to William. "Come here, I want to tell you something." William obeyed. "You are my nephew. I was caught by the land otter people years earlier." William was astonished at the discovery. He did see some similarity to the ant who had actually disappeared years later. As he drew closer, he discovered hair on her hands and arms and neck. Hair was everywhere other than on her face. Her arms were short and came out of her chest like otter's forepaws. Her face did appear like his aunt's, but the upper lip was pulled up to the nose to look like an otter's. Repulsed, he drew away, but she followed him. "I will now tell you how you got here," she said, as she reached up and drew the otter tail from his ears. "See this land otter sinew? It is from the tail of a land otter. Your wife laced it through the hole in your ear, and that is what drew in the land otter people to you." William had trouble believing that his wife would do such a thing to him. He remembered how sweet she was to him the night before he left. "This can't be true," he wept. "She was so loving on our last night together." "It was all an act," his auntie said. "She wanted you out of the way, my poor nephew. It is your wife who has caused you all this suffering." Initially, William was sad and hurt. He considered his lovely wife and her long, shiny black hair and large eyes, with a look of mischief. She had been deceitful to him, and his people most likely knew about it. How foolish he felt, how humiliated. "She will suffer for this, believe me." Now that the land otter sinew was out of his ear, he began to see things more clearly. This was not his home. No wonder the food was so bad. Otter food, ugh. Would he ever have the ability to return home? Though he had actually kept his distance from all the land otter people, he eventually succumbed to a young land otter lady who respected him and taught him a lot of their ways. Things to make his life with them more manageable. She had helped him in his isolation, and he had consented to wed her. Would she be able to help him now? He rushed to her and begged for aid to return to his village. "But there's nothing I could do," she said. "The men rule here." She was intending to keep him in the land otter's realm, for she liked him very much and did not wish to lose him. "I want to return home," William cried out enraged. "You inform your people to take me home, or I will kill all of them." However, even as he spoke, he saw that he could barely lift his arms. When he was finally able to raise them, he discovered that he had no sensation in his body. The land otter's spirit power was exerting its power over him. Even though he was able to resist becoming a land otter person, he was still physically subject to their power. His young wife took pity on William and went to plead with her uncle, the land otter chief, to take him back to his home. Better to have her loved one happy at home than unpleasant here. In the beginning, the land otter chief refused. But father, it's been 2 years now that we have actually been trying to control William's mind. If we haven't done so now, we will never succeed. The chief started to agree. I will let him go, he stated with hesitation, for William would have been a great acquisition. I will take him back home, but I will provide him the land otter spirit to utilize among his people, so they will understand how fantastic its power is. This man has actually proved himself to be worthy of that power, for he has shown great mental discipline and a strong willpower. He will be able to use this spiritual power for recovering the sick, foretelling the future, and discovering those who are lost. He will be kept in the highest regard by his people. William's young spouse was delighted to hear that her partner had been picked for such a great blessing. Thank you so much, Father. It will make the people admire us more, she said. The chief called his brothers-in-law to him to ask for their aid, and 4 of them set out with him and William in a canoe. As they came out into the water from under the rocky ledge, William saw purple starfish clinging to the barnacled rocks under the water and sea polyps and jellyfish, inching their bodies around the canoe. When he looked up from the canoe, he saw that he was twisted among the kelp stems. Were they going underwater, or was this kelp floating? He could tell what was going on. He appeared to be in a daze and started to feel confused. A strange feeling started to come over him. The land otter people were exerting their power over him. These land otters are going to become my spirits, he understood. It was then that he realized it was dark out. They need to travel by light and sleep during the day, he believed. But, of course, that makes sense. They are always hunting at night for their food. The second day, the land otter brother-in-laws were rowing William towards home. They overslept. It was late evening before they started rowing again, and almost dawn as they drew near the shore. Afraid that Raven would caw before they reached land, and therefore cause their death, the land otter men scrambled to the beach, now looking more like otters than men. They spread out to hide in the bushes and rocks. William was left to pull up the canoe alone. He had a hard time to bring the canoe ashore. Alone now with his land otter spirits, William set out to the nearest town. He did not attempt to expose himself to the people, sensing that he had undergone a strange change. When he came across some fish and kelp drying in the sun, he helped himself. People could see the food vanish, but could not see anyone taking it, although they did hear rustling noises when they took the food in and put it away in their baskets. When they took the food in and put it away in their baskets, William attempted to make himself visible to ask for food, but that was not effective either. The people could only see a dark shadow person standing in front of them, and when they saw him as a shadow man, they became drowsy. "That's William's shadow," wept one of the anglers as he caught a glimpse of it. "Let's get him and take him to the chief." They followed the shadow, but whenever they got close to it, they began to feel drowsy. During the night, he would take fish that had actually been hung out on lines to dry. He was behaving like a kukushka. A night watch was set up along the borders of the village, and sure enough, when night came, they could see a shadow man take the drying fish and vanish. Then they decided to set a snare to capture him. They spaced out nails out of sight along the lines of the drying racks. In the beginning, the nails only cut William's hand, but after a while, contact with the metal started to revive William's human form. Metal was able to ward off the land otter's power. Metal could also remove its effects on a person. Metal could also be used to turn a shadow person back to a regular human form. The metal nails could make him flesh again and stop people from getting drowsy when they got near him. When William's body became firm enough to hold, they took him home on a stretcher. They noticed that his body was covered gently all over with fur, except for his face. His hands and feet were more heavily furred. He had swelling everywhere from crawling on the sharp rocks without shoes or clothes. On William's arrival, his shaman and Uncle Bob contacted his animal spirit to help bring William to his full senses. As William ended up being partially conscious, his mom's family attempted to feed him. However, he pressed them away. They brought a tray of delicious fish when he was fully conscious, but he brushed that aside too, upsetting it and
scattering the fish all around. Then he hid his face with his hands and sat by the fire. As time went by, he started to eat a little food and regain his strength. Then he remembered what his land otter aunt had actually informed him about his wife, and he felt the anger and humiliation returning. My wife betrayed me, he told his uncle. It was she who made me a victim of the land otter people by lacing a sinew from the land otter tail through the hole in my ear for ornaments. Bob gasped. However, William went on. I resisted going with them initially, but I finally had to give in rather than die. They were never able to control my mind completely. I think that is why they consented to bring me back. Bob was surprised that he learned of his wife's treachery and became outraged by it. Take the clever female out at low tide and tie her to a rock listed below the tide line, he told the men. Leave her down there as the tides come in. The villagers gathered in silence to watch the female being led down to the reef. William's heart hurt as he saw her walk, pale and straight back, to the place of her death. She had actually been so dear to him. Should he call them back? Even if he wanted to, he could not. The chief's order needed to be followed. Treachery should be penalized. The sight filled all who saw with horror. However, the people felt that the punishment was appropriate. Only after justice was done did William's hunger return and eventually his complete strength. He told people about the kukushkas, what they looked like, how they behaved, what their houses were like. The spirits he had actually gained in his time resisting the land otter people stayed with him and made him a powerful shaman, the first one ever to return from the land otter people and to attain their power.
Alright, so a few interesting things about this story. Number one, when people saw him when he came back from the kukushkas, he looked like a shadow. Number two, people got drowsy when they were around him as a shadow person. He was abducted by one of these supernatural creatures, just like you hear people going missing on Missing 411 or Bigfoot taking people or something like that. This guy was taken by something, by some kind of shape-shifting creatures. And these creatures took the shape of otters because they liked otters. As you recall in the story, when he returned to the human form, he was hairy. So he turned hairy because as I said in my Skinwalker video, shapeshifters take the spiritual energy, they manifest the spirits of certain animals. So when I say spirits, I mean like their emotional energy. Like a dog is loyal, a bear has power, eagles have power, strength. There are certain spirits or qualities that certain creatures have. And when you embody them strongly, you can become the creature that you're trying to mimic. Like, I suppose it's possible to shapeshift into a fly, but I don't know what a fly's spiritual properties would be, so that's kind of a tough one. Anyway, electromagnetic frequencies have been shown to cause dizziness, disorientation, confusion, just like you hear in a lot of those paranormal stories. And another interesting thing about this story was that he was a shadow person, so he was taken to their realm, he was abducted by these creatures and taken to their world, and then he was brought back. They agreed to take him back. But when he came back, he was viewed as a shadow. So that means he became one of those shadow people that people see. And then, in order to bring him back to the flesh, to make him more solid, because he was this see-through thing that, when I read the book, he was trying to grab food, an apple or something, and the apple fell down, but his hand kind of passed through it. It was another shadow person story, but I couldn't find it. And this one, he was stealing fish and dried fish and eating it. So he was able to manipulate this world, but he wasn't very solid. And every time someone came near him, they got drowsy. And you got to think, the drowsy description, is that similar to these paranormal stories that we hear where people get disoriented? Like the Missing 411, when they get all confused or running through the woods and stuff like that. Is this similar? Is the drowsiness similar to that? Anyway, they brought him back by making him touch metal or iron. I don't know exactly what kind of metal, but What is it about metal that makes it special? Metal is a well-known weapon against the Fae. Supernatural creatures like vampires, the Fae, and, folklore, they say they don't like metal. Why would they not like metal? I believe that creatures like the Bigfoot or the little people or any of these cryptids, they don't like light and they don't like metal for a very specific reason. Light is electromagnetic frequencies. Metal is electrically conductive. So the power of shamanism must have something to do with the flow of electrons and the flow of actual energy. Let's think of magic this way. Carl Sagan said that technology that's very advanced would seem like magic to primitive people. Shamanism, or magic, the things that these creatures can do, seems impossible to us and seems like magic to us. But to them, it might be as mundane as driving a car is for us. Imagine a couple hundred years ago if people were to see the technology that we have today. Cars and televisions, like if you were to show someone from 1,000 years ago a television, they would probably think it was a portal to the heavens or a portal to another world and freak out about the magical powers of the TV. I think we're primitive right now, and we think what the cryptids are doing is magic. And because it's magic, we roll our eyes at it and act like it's stupid superstition and fairy tales and it can't be real, magic doesn't exist. But what if magic and shamanism is actually science? It's just science that we don't understand. Electromagnetic frequencies mess with shamanic powers. As you remember in the interview I did a long time ago with the Yakima guy, I forgot his name. Anyway, he said that when the shaman wanted to do a ritual to communicate with Bigfoot, he had to shut the power breaker off in the house, black out all the windows so that his power would be more pronounced. And if you look up what the witching hour is, it says the witching hour is between midnight and 3 a.m. within that 3-hour window, which I think is vague. But it says because a witch's power is strongest at night. Is it because witchcraft is evil and darkness helps witchcraft become stronger because they're evil people that command evil energy? No, that's not the reason. The reason darkness helps shamanism is because shamanism has to do with the flow of electrons and the flow of electromagnetic energy. Now, I did my research. EMFs can cause confusion, memory loss, and all kinds of things. And often in UFO abduction cases and abduction cases of people who got taken by strange monsters and stuff, they say that they were confused and disoriented. Metal conducts electricity. If something was creating a shamanic or magical field around them, that field would be creating imagine an electromagnetic electron field flowing around something, enabling it to do interdimensional travel, enabling it to vanish from our sight to go into a place called the shadow state. I believe that Bigfoot and little people and other creatures hide in the shadow state. They become shadow people. So whenever you see a shadow person, it's not a ghost, it's a creature watching you from somewhere else. It's kind of like being partially here and being partially not here at the same time. This story of William, this Native American story, shows that a creature in the shadow state can be pulled to the material plane again, to the physical. So, if we want to catch these things, we'd have to find a way, some kind of method to absorb electrons, to conduct electricity, like a net. Like you're trying to discharge energy in a area rapidly to bring it back to the physical form. If something's hiding and spying on us, like let's say Bigfoot, little people, aliens, and other creatures, watch us unbeknownst to us as shadow people. My next video is going to focus on shadow people. And the reason I'm doing these videos in congruence with each other is because I believe that when things become shadow people, they're partially here and partially not here. And I think that people can accidentally do shamanism or magic and generate that electron field that makes them go into an off dimension, like pulls them into the shadow state or whatever you want to call it. They get pulled into the shadow state and they get stuck there and they die there. And I also believe that there is time distortion when you enter the shadow state. So let's think about it. I heard a story once on Darkness Prevails, and the story went that the mom of this kid, her brother went missing a long time ago, like 20 years ago or something, and the kid at a playground, right? And so this kid went to the playground, and the uncle was still a young boy and was talking to him and visiting him at night. I think what happened was that her brother never actually died, and it wasn't his spirit. He got stuck in some sort of anomaly. He got trapped in the shadow state. He would only be able to interact during the darkness because in the dark there's less electromagnetic frequencies going through the air, aka light. Light is electromagnetic frequencies. So in the night, he can interact with this world better because there's no interference going messing with him being able to come here, because he's partially stuck here and somewhere else, kind of like purgatory or a fugue state or something, like the upside down or the on Stranger Things. So I'm not saying that this other dimension that's here and not here is evil. I'm just saying that it exists and you can get stuck there. So if this shadow state exists, then there must be creatures in nature that live there. There must be an ecosystem there. There are probably creatures, animals, and peoples that know how to live in this area and come here and go back. And they go in between the shadow state and the physical at will. And it's as easy for them to go there as it would be for us to walk to the store. And it has to do with generating some type of electrical field or something. I don't really understand how it works. But the fact that you can pull something from the shadow state to the material world, like they did in this story, proves that it's possible to catch these things. Proves that they're not invincible to us. They're not beyond us. They're just doing something that we don't understand. So if you want to catch that shadow person that's been watching you, try making it touch a lot of metal that conducts electricity so you can pull it out of the shadow state and into the physical state. And if you have a loved one that is a shadow person and a ghost now, and they're haunting a house because they're now ghosts, like, I think those people are missing people. That's what I think. I think when people see shadow people like the Hat Man and like people that are dressed in old-fashioned clothing, and they think, oh, they're ghosts because they come in the room as shadows, and it's really scary and creepy. What if they're fucking scared? What if these people are scared? What if they did something on accident or encountered some kind of weird anomaly where they got sucked into this parallel world that's kind of here and kind of not, and they could see us at night and they can interact with us at night in this world, but all we see when we see them is a shadow person. We freak out thinking it's a demon. But in reality, it's a person that's trying to say, hey, please help me. I'm stuck here or something. So they watch you. They're trying to communicate. Maybe they're talking and you can't hear them because we're here and they're there. So the sound waves are traveling in that place, but not here. Anyway, I'm going on kind of a tangent here. But shadow people are not ghosts. Shadow people are always flesh and blood. Remember that. This story proves it. And I've heard other stories that fall along these lines. In one story, a girl was checking out a place that was creepy or whatever, an abandoned building. And then all of a sudden, she was somewhere else. And there was a pastor saying, "Be gone, demon!" And people screaming when they saw her as if she was a shadow person. And then some pastor trying to banish the devil. So she actually... It was from the perspective of someone who was perceived as a demon by other people. But to her, she was just like, what the hell's going on here? Like, I'm just a normal person and people are acting like I'm a demon. Imagine if you got stuck in the shadow state and you're trying to contact people and loved ones and you're like only able to interact with this world at night because of the low electromagnetic interference. And you're trying to reach out for help, but you couldn't because everyone was like, oh, a demon, and freaking out. It's like we're too stupid as a humans to think logically and think beyond the knee-jerk reaction. Just because it's a shadow doesn't mean it's evil. Just because it's dark doesn't mean it's evil. These are misconceptions. Darkness is lack of electromagnetic frequencies. It's a lack of light. It's a lack of energy that flows through, that reflects off things and allows us to see. Just because something is dark, it doesn't make it evil. I've heard multiple stories of little people and Bigfoot melting into a shadow, and then they see a little shadow drift off. And this was over the years, so I don't actually have access to those stories. But if any of you have heard anything similar that validates a human going in and out of the shadow state like this story does, share it with me. Send me a link. Don't just be like if you know about it, like tell me about it or whatever. Shadow people are flesh and blood. And these things, and some people probably use the shadow state to spy on people. And all kinds of, like, who knows, like they probably go in it, grab someone, go back into the shadow state and take somebody. Like, who knows what you could do with it. Anyway, stay tuned for my next video. I'm going to cover more on this subject and how shadow people are flesh and blood and not spirits. Until next time, see you guys later.